I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Well, welcome back to Focus Today, and we've got a special guest here as we're talking about the whole issue of the protests that have been going on against the Trump victory that happened just a little over a week now. It seems like it was much further than that, but a lot of things going on. We've seen 112 arrested in the Portland area, and that is one of the bigger hotspots of protests that have been going on, and people are saying, well, what actually are they protesting? It looks like it's more rioting going on. Well, we're going to be kind of talking about that and how perhaps there is a difference between the two and how they're combined in a way. Joe Messina is the host of the Real Side Radio Show, and he's with us today. Joe, good to have you here. A lot of stuff going on up the street from where we are for the most part, but really in a lot of places, a lot of schools, we saw a lot of high school students who were also protesting, and I would really like to have talked to some of them about what it was that specifically they were protesting. I think when you see groups of people and you think, well, you have a collective idea, but you end up talking specifically, and I think it's a different picture right there. But we're seeing a lot of protests. Let me ask you this. Some people would say, no, it's not protests, it's rioting. What do you see the difference? I think I know the difference between the two, but tell me, how do you define the two?
Well, I just wrote a piece called prioting, okay, where people can't figure out what it is that's actually going on. Now, protest is something we've seen them. Well, I'm old enough. I've seen them through the 60s, 70s, and you know, it's when you're trying to get your point across. I don't care if you use signs, bullhorns, you're yelling, or what have you. We move into rioting when you start destroying people's property, public and private property, when you start jumping on police cars, setting things ablaze in the street. That is not a protest. Now, all of a sudden, it's a bunch of thugs that are street fighting, and it takes the emphasis off what you're fighting. I also, not to take anything away from our young people, but when you think about high school kids that are protesting, to what end? They don't vote. They're coming out of a government class, or what's being fed to them as to what's wrong. I mean, I've seen people on the street doing interviews, and they don't really, Trump is a racist. Well, how? Tell me something he said that was racist. They can't tell you. They have no idea. They're following the wave. They're following what their buddies are doing. I personally believe they're actually doing some of the things that the liberal teachers are telling them to do, or feeding them as to what is truth or not truth.
Yeah. Well, if that's happening, which I don't doubt that it is, we're seeing a whole lot of that occurring for sure. Now, right. I know this. There are some people who will say, look, if you didn't vote, you have no right to protest. I don't particularly take that point of view, because I figure, hey, you have a choice of voting. That's your opinion. You can do it. Sure. You can protest if you want to or not. You lose credibility if you haven't voted and you're protesting, because it's like, what, you didn't realize this could happen for something that you opposed? But here's an example. This is from the Oregonian. 36 of 112 arrested were registered in Oregon, but they didn't return ballots. It shows 32% of the people arrested didn't vote, in other words. And 31 people, 28%, did vote in Oregon. The others may have voted somewhere else, which there's a whole nother issue right there where they trucked in from another place. And I know it's easy to say, well, George Soros did it. He could have. I wouldn't doubt it. He's got the money to do it. But do you think, are we in the mode of professional protesters, rioters, professional pro-rioting? Let's see, what was the word you said? Prioting.
Yeah.
Prioters? No. They're professional prioters. Is that the word?
I think you're right on. And to your point that you don't have a right to protest, I don't know if I'd say you don't have a right to protest, but what are you standing on? What is it exactly that you're going to go out there? What you're saying is, even though I didn't vote, even though I didn't get off the couch, even though I didn't care enough to find a place to go cast my ballot, I don't care what the American people have said. Now, we can get into the argument of the popular vote versus the Electoral College. I still believe that the Electoral College gives the little people the vote, gives the people in the suburbs and the rural areas, makes their vote count or helps their vote to count. But I think it's disingenuous for you to get out in the street, be part of a larger group that's doing damage to personal property, and have us take you seriously. Now, and again, to your point, the people who were registered who did vote, the ones that did vote, God bless them. They got involved in the process, which is what we should do. It's very hard for me to give them credit when they don't get out and do the heavy lifting. They want to come out afterward and complaining about a process they did not want to be. They chose not to be involved in.
You know, I think your idea of protests and rioting, they are different. They're combining
Much
the
different.
two, and so now we have a third category that way. Put it in perspective, because some people who maybe millennials or younger, they don't see how they're saying, well, people have always protested. You think of the Berkeley protests of the Vietnam
Sure.
War and all the rest. To me, there's a difference going on from what we're seeing now from what was happening then. What's your view on protests that we've always had in the United States, but it seems like there's been a sea change shift in the last decade or so?
Well, even go back further than that. Let's go all the way back to MLK. You know, and Martin Luther King's day, his whole process was peace. You know, they brought signs, they chanted, they sang. And they didn't start the fights. You know, we saw some violence in those protests, but the violence was done by the authorities, if we're going to be honest about it. As the years went on through the Vietnam protests, yeah, there was some violence there, but again, it was the authorities with the water cannons, if you recall, and with the dogs and what have you. The protesters were exactly that. They carried signs, you know, they chanted, they did sit-ins, which is, in my perspective, a nonviolent scenario. But now what you've seen is you have this mentality by these priots when they get out there that if they don't get a response pretty quickly, then we start smashing windows. We start smashing cars. It's not even a protest against authority, a protest against a vote. Not when you're smashing the window of a department store and grabbing what you can. It's nothing more than a bunch of thugs, you know, out for a night of looting. I can't. How can you give them any credence, you give them any credibility when, again, most of what they're doing is they're out there for the damage. And if you've seen some of these people in interviews, they really don't understand what they're out there for. Very hard, very confusing from somebody in our position to be able to help them with their cause, if you would.
Yeah, I find it interesting when Jimmy Kimmel does what you know, we used to see with some of the other late night hosts. They go out and they talk to people about what they believe and all the rest, college kids in college and so on. You'll find that they seem to not have a lot of the information they need. I'd like to see these questions of protesters. You know, if you actually could have a rational discussion about what it is they believe and why they're doing it, I think it would be very eye-opening. Let me ask you this. You know, I think just as many people were opposed to President Obama when he took office as people who are opposed to Donald Trump. Yet we didn't have rioting, protests after Obama won. Why not, and why now?
Well, look, all right, when President Obama took office the first time, actually, my show had just started when he took office, and I was thinking to myself, let's give him some time. Everybody's on his case about, you know, being a community organizer or what have you. Let's see what the man can do. And so I was not in that camp at first of despair. But when he was elected the second time, yes, I was. I was in the same camp of despair. And being on the radio 3 hours a day, I wasn't calling for violence. I was calling for people to hold their feet to the fire, hold your congressman's feet to the fire. That was the protest for me. Vote in somebody differently. We think differently. And I'm sorry, and I know this may cause some aggravation with some of your listeners on the left, but the right doesn't go to violence. We go to looking at a process, at a way to make things happen within boundaries. Yes, we do have some on the far right, the fringe, that want to look at violence, but that's a very small number. We don't bus people in. We don't rent buses and grab everybody we can that's on unemployment or what have you and send them to different parts of the town. The difference is now is look at what has happened over the last few years, where when a certain group of people don't get their way, we go right into the protest/riot mode. We go right into the screaming about changing. You realize that they're protesting a constitutional process. And to think that a California senator, and I live in California, Boxer's introducing a law to get rid of the college, the Electoral College. You can't do it with a law. You have to do it with a constitutional convention. You have to take it out of the Constitution. It shows you the ignorance that we have from an educational standpoint as to how the process works. And that scares me even more than the rioters, is our ignorance to how the law works.
And do you think the people on the right have a better grasp of that? Can it be that simple?
I think the people on the right don't see things as we have to protest it to fix it. You know, you've got to get your congressmen, your senators on board, and you have to make a difference. just going to the street with signs, all that does is bring attention to it. When you start ripping apart cars and tearing down windows, the only thing you've brought attention to is look at those people against this process. They're nothing but thugs. In that conversation, you don't even know what they're protesting anymore. All you see is a bunch of people rioting.
You know, it reminds me, there was a video, I don't know if you've seen it, of a mother. I can't believe that she even posted this after having taken it, but she took a video of her son who was about 10 years old or so, and they had a mock election in school, and she found out he voted for Trump in that mock election, and she told him he had to leave. She packed his bags and sent him out. The kid was crying like crazy. You did see that. I mean, I was looking at that and I thought, what is my reference point to how this is good mothering, being a good parent? I think CPS is looking into this to say, was this some sort of abuse? But I look at that and I think if you're willing to sacrifice your kids like this, you're willing to do just about anything. And I just thought, I can't imagine that this is considered a logical conclusion to what's going on. So I think there are a few of us like myself who are saying, what can we do in a positive way to bring some sort of relevance, some cohesion, some dialogue back? Do you think there's anything that can be done right now to help bring the two sides together, or are we just going to see more of this?
No, I think, it's funny because one of my children said, look, I just can't vote for Trump. I don't like him. There's something about him that rubs me the wrong way. I didn't browbeat her. We talked about it for about 20 minutes, and we went on to, are you coming for Thanksgiving or not? I mean, it wasn't that kind of situation. But to your other question, look, the problem is we are no longer Americans in this country. We are now Democrats or Republicans, the majority of us. So it's not a matter of saying what's the best for America. It seems to be what is the best that's going to elevate or make our party better or stronger. We have an attitude out there, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be dogmatic about this. This doesn't exist as much on the right as it does on the left. It's overwhelming on the left. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, if you don't find my rules the right rules, then you're an idiot. You're a bigot. You're a homophobe. All the phobes that you can come up with is what you are if you don't agree with them. How do you have an open conversation? How do you come to an agreement? How do you find common ground when the first thing that the other person is doing to you in a conversation is saying, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you have a low IQ, you're a racist? That is not conversational. That now becomes an attack scenario. So until we can sit down and actually discuss, we can't do anything.
Good point, Joe. I appreciate your input. Joe Messina is the host of the Real Side Radio Show. Thanks for being with us to talk about this. Maybe you'll be able to get some of your callers to come up with some real three-point answers to these questions. That would be great. Joe, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Coming up, we're going to be talking with Brian Platt as we're going to be discussing Planned Parenthood, the ongoing Trump riots and all the rest, and what the new president means for the abortion issue. It's all ahead here on Focus Today.